recording. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our fifth and final meeting of this work group. Um, Let me go ahead and run through some quick standard housekeeping for today, and then let's talk a little bit about what the plan for this conversation is. So, as always, the meeting is being recorded. The recording will be posted online. Transcript is available. Please stay muted until it's your time to speak. We are not holding a public comment period at this meeting either, and I'll talk more about that in a second. Next slide. So, want to set the plan for today's agenda. Hopefully, want to spend the rest of our time coming to a recommendation, and then we'll spend a few minutes at the end to wrap up and make sure that you have clear understanding of what happens next and ongoing opportunities to engage. If we land early, we land early. That might be miraculous, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, next slide. As a reminder, making a recommendation to OHA. OHA will make the final decision. Next slide. We've had 5 meetings as originally planned, and this is the last of the series. I think it may be a little bit of a stretch to say we had an emerging recommendation coming out of meeting 4, but we have several proposals on the table, and we're going to see if we can get that to land today. Next slide. This is just wanting to be really clear. This is our last work group meeting. We are not planning to hold a sixth meeting. So if we don't reach a recommendation today, we don't reach a recommendation. That is an option, and I'll talk more about that shortly. But want to make sure everyone knows, work group members, members of the public, anyone can submit a public comment about this until November 30th. OHA will take all of those comments into consideration along with the work group recommendation. So if you would like to make an additional statement, if you agree or disagree with wherever we land as a work group, or if you'd like to provide additional or supplemental comment, you have until November 30th to do that. All good? Any questions about process or today's meeting before we start getting into content? Okay, you all know the drill. This is also the first time for me that I've done a work group that's met so frequently in such a short period of time. And so it's actually kind of nice because I've spent so much time with you over the last couple weeks. Okay, let's talk about the options for today. So, one more slide. I want to start with a process check. So, the goal, as we originally started out on in meeting 1 and even in recruiting for this group, is that the work group would make a recommendation. I think in my head, and maybe for many of you, we were thinking that would be a single recommendation. The recommendation is you may or may not come to consensus. I think I'm going to spoil some of the later slides. I don't expect this group to come to consensus today. We might, not going to rule it out, but I think there are some divides, some dividing lines, and I want to acknowledge that. If the work group does not come to consensus, there are 3 options on the slide, and I want to maybe also consider a few more. And I want to do a pulse check here and get a sense of what you all feel comfortable with, and before we have the rest of the conversation. So, option 0, which is not on the slide and should have been, is majority vote only. If we don't reach consensus, we take a majority vote, call it a day. That's the work group's recommendation. Option 1, majority vote plus a minority report. Happy to document a second perspective and have that officially attached to the work group recommendation. Second option, there could be multiple recommendations. That is different than a majority vote and a minority vote. We could agree to say the work group perspective is there are different opinions. Here's what they are. So kind of fine line nuance there, but wanted to put it out there. And then finally, no recommendation. You could not want to just have this be a majority vote process. There are pros and cons of all of these approaches, and the work group does not actually land a recommendation. I want to say, switching hats from facilitator to OHA, like, I don't know that that's necessarily a problem. I think this group has had incredibly rich conversation, and there's a lot of information and all of the proposals that have come up that OHA will take into consideration in making a final decision, whether or not the work group has a single recommendation or multiple recommendations to advance. And again, there'll be the public comments as part of that. So, um, like I said, additional meetings to consider deliberating off the table. Don't want to consider that. Are there any other process checks or proposals or options that anyone would like to suggest? And or are there any immediate reactions to some of the process options for today? Justin, please.
Hi, Sarah. I just wanted to, in reviewing the materials, I think the proposal that got the greatest votes was fairly aligned with the guiding principles that we sent in. And I just wanted to note that our guiding principles were not necessarily advocating for a 50-50 weight on the indicators in that formula. So I hear what you're saying, which is like we're in a tough spot. We might not get to a consensus, but I'm just sort of floating out there that like if OHA doesn't like the 50-50 formula that so many people kind of thought or were leaning towards, maybe we look at a different weight of the indicators towards median wage, but keep the formula because I think the formula is valuable and I like the principles that it's based on. So just wanted to float that out there.
Okay, so let me say that back to you, Justin. You're saying, and I agree. And again, sorry, we're skipping ahead to some of the results of the feedback you
Yeah,
all
sorry.
provided over email. I think whether or not there's majority vote or consensus of on one of the proposals on the table, you're saying there could still be some modification of one of those proposals.
Yes.
Check. Agreed. Okay. Charlie.
Well, I guess, wanted to recognize the makeup of this work group, which is, overwhelmingly represented by entities that are subject to the cost growth target. And so I think I kind of lean towards either, well, and then I would also say I don't know if that's particularly representative of the state as the perspectives of Oregonians. And so I think, say either no recommendation, or if we do have recommendations, at least one of them should be just from those who are not subject to the cost growth target itself to kind of, just make it clear that many of the groups around this are kind of trying or giving input on a thing that is actually regulating them.
So Charlie, again, to restate, you would be saying you're process-wise more comfortable with no recommendation or either multiple recommendations that are clearly industry, not industry, or majority vote and minority opinion.
Yeah, I think probably in that order of preference.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. James.
Hey, Sarah, James Parr, Salem Health. Hey, just I guess, a process question. Um, and you've made it clear in multiple slides that OHA um, ultimately decides what's going to happen. So I'm not sure that I understand the significance of options one, two, or three in how OHA then does their work. What are OHA's next steps that might be useful for us to decide if one of a particular one of these options is more important than another?
Okay. I think I understand what you're asking. Let me try to answer, and if I didn't, please let me know. Um, OHA set up this process to have a recommendation from the work group, and that would be what is considered, and that what goes up through OHA's uh, internal decision-making process and discussion to make the final decision. I think I would frame it as a work group recommendation would carry more weight than here's a set of notes from the work group conversation. If the work group doesn't reach a recommendation, I think perspectives have been surfaced and we'll do our best to carry that forward into the conversation with leadership, but it's definitely more straightforward to say the work group recommended X. Here's their rationale. Here's some differing opinions that came up in the work group. What do we make of that? Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. And just one follow-up question from that. I'm just going back over the slides, and I was looking at the slides from our very first meeting. And in there, on your slide 10, it said, as this is a large group, the work group will make decisions by majority vote. Minority perspectives will also be documented and accompanied any recommendations. So has the approach changed from what you said in slide 10 of our
Yeah,
first meeting?
thank you. I think I would say the approach has not necessarily changed. That was the working assumption. And I think as we've had these foreign meetings up till today, we've received really rich comments. Many of you have submitted comments, you've sent emails, you've shared a lot of thoughts. And I think if we reduce it to a strict numeric vote, that might not carry. And wanted to open the option today if the work group wanted to consider anything else. If everyone feels comfortable with a majority vote and a minority report, then great, that's what we'll plan on. And that makes the process easier. I think this was a check to make sure that was still correct, even though, yes, that is how we set this up initially.
But well, then my perspective is that we stick with the original plan, but obviously that's just one view. Like you said, I think you were right. You nailed it the first time. This is a very large group. It's just not realistic for everybody to feel the same way.
Thanks, James. Sierra.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to echo that I think it's important for this work group to move forward with some kind of a recommendation.
Okay. As opposed to no recommendation, check. And option one, majority vote and minority report. In the chat from Daniel, great. Okay. And Kirsten.
I, I do think it's important. I think to reflect the value of this conversation, which I think is very valuable, despite very divergent opinions of this work group, I think it is useful to condense that in a way that it can be heard by OHA. And so I'm supportive of I like number two here the best, move multiple targets recommended. Of course, given that I expect to be in the minority here, it's hard to support the majority vote. But I think it would be fair, or I would suggest that we put forward kind of that like substantial number of the work group. Maybe we have an industry recommendation and a not subject to the program recommendation or something like that. So it's I think that we are representing to OHA output of discussion, but that we are recognizing some differences in who those opinions are coming from.
Thanks, Kirsten. Charlotte, your hand went down. I saw your comment in chat. Anything else you wanted to add there? No. Okay. Sierra.
No, I think that some of those proposals assume that that the members of the work group are voting purely based on industry versus other perspectives, and I think that we can't actually draw that conclusion uh, based on the way that the votes happened leading up to this point here. And so we do see strong support for a particular proposal at this point. And since this work group was set up with an assumption that we would have a path forward based on majority vote and still documenting other perspectives as well, I think that we should stick to that and probably move forward to reviewing the rest of the slides as well.
Okay. I appreciate the commentary here as well as the callback to how we were originally framing this. I appreciate everyone's perspective. What I think I'm hearing is agreement that we move forward with the majority vote, minority report. And we can talk more about what that looks like as we go into the rest of the conversation and that becomes more clear. All right, Charlie, last thought on this, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, quickly. Yeah, I mean, I guess not ascribing motives to anyone, but at the very least, I think it is helpful information to document whether the affiliation of those voting for one proposal versus another. I think that's important information for OHA leadership to have.
All right, thanks, Charlie. Okay, let's get into the proposals themselves. So, next slide, please. Recap. So, in meeting four, there were four proposals that were made. They are numbered proposal one to four. We are going to consistently refer to them in that order. There is a document that was sent out last week over email. It was also included in the meeting materials and it's on the website that has a little bit more detail on the proposal. This is the one slide version. So, very quick recap. Proposal one, target value would be 3.6%. This is based on the projected median wage for the next 5 years with the 85% multiplier to account for some economic forecasting uncertainty. This is also the proposal that has the automatic review thresholds that are triggered if three economic indicator circumstances are met. The second proposal, 3.75%. This is the 50-50 blend of the historic median Oregon wage growth over the last 5 years and the last 5 years historic general inflation, CPI West, minus a percentage point to bend the cost curve. The proposal to revisit the target here is every 6 years. The third proposal varies, and there's a whole table with all the ways in which it varies in the full note. This is the 50-50 blend of historic national healthcare expenditures and historic Oregon median wage growth. This is currently weighted, and the data that were summarized in the one pager are based on the 50-50 blend. No notes on revisiting the target. And then finally, proposal four, 3.0%. I don't know why the percentage fell off that slide. 3%, the target as originally set by the implementation committee. So, next slide. Before we get further, at the last meeting, Keaton had suggested, and there was agreement that we do a pulse check on a question before we get into the actual proposal ranking or voting. And that question was, is it appropriate for the cost growth target for 2026 to 2030 to incorporate or somehow take into account an indicator that reflects healthcare industry costs? There are a variety of potential indicators that would reflect that perspective. So this was a yes/no question. We sent out a survey. Next slide. We had 17 respondents. So just as a reminder, there are 34 signed up work group members. So about half of folks responded. And we had yes 14 out of the 17 and no 3 out of the 17 respondents. I'm just going to share a couple of notes. We did have an open text. Does anyone want to comment on their vote? And we have some notes from that. So the folks who said yes, themes were it's unfair to hold healthcare entities accountable to an unattainable target, and taking healthcare costs into account will make it more attainable. Hard to see if the target could be achievable if it doesn't take any measure of recent cost growth into account. Healthcare consumption is different from consumption of other goods and services. The target should take input costs and increased utilization into account, and acknowledgement from multiple commenters that providers cannot control all of the inputs that are driving healthcare costs. Folks who said no, some comments included that it doesn't make sense to try to set the target based on the things that we're trying to change. And sounds like our costs should be allowed to go up by the amount that costs go up. I know not everybody had a chance to respond to this survey. Not everyone saw the email before it was closed. We did have a time deadline because these meetings are happening so fast. So acknowledge that these numbers may not have shaken out exactly the same way had everybody responded, but this is what we heard between meetings. Okay, next slide. So let's go back to the proposals. We also asked you all to do ranked choice voting, sort of a light version of ranked choice voting, on the four proposals to provide a starting place for today's discussion. Unfortunately, I was rushing. The tool I picked broke, did not accept online ranked choice voting. I'm really sorry about that. So for everyone who sent me an email, we manually compiled and de-identified your vote, and that's on the next slide. But I'm really sorry about that. I think we have fewer responses because some of you tried to get into the survey later, and I own that. So next slide, starting point for today's discussion. Of the 34 work group members, we received a ranked vote from 16. And this is how it stacked out. So orientation to this group, going left to right across the slide, which proposal was people's first choice, and then second, third, and fourth choice. Many people only voted for their first choice or made it clear that they only could support a first or second choice. They could not support third and fourth. So things do not sum up to 16 because not everybody voted. Not everybody, we did not force somebody to put all options in a ranked order. So options that either could not be lived with or were not voted for at all fell off naturally. Of the 34 workgroup members, 13 of the 16 who voted selected proposal 3 as their first choice. This is the 50-50 blend that includes healthcare costs and median wage. I want to note that the one member who selected something else, it was essentially a variation of proposal 3. It was proposal 3 with different weighting. So want to note that you could maybe count that one both ways. All right. I'm going to stop there for a second. Are there any questions about this summary or about what you're seeing here and sort of the pulse check for today's discussion? Okay. Let's go one more slide. So if we are assuming that that ranked voting from about half of you was a first pass at a majority vote, it would look like proposal 3 is emerging as the potential recommendation, which then leads to some additional questions. So the first question is that the recommendation? And not everybody agreed that it was the first choice, or several people indicated that they could not live with proposal 3. Also, not everybody agreed to a 50-50 split. And I think, Justin, to your point at the top of today's meeting, maybe we should have a conversation about other weights. And that could be something we talk about now. And then also acknowledge that the proposal was just historic. It did not specify how long that historic look back period should be. So this table on the screen now summarizes what the target would be depending on a 5, 10, or 20-year look back. And also acknowledging that in some of your emails to us, several people suggested a shorter look back period of 3 years, which I think if I did the math right would be a target of 4.7% if the historic period meant 3 years. So I'm going to stop there. This is the last of the canned content, and all we're going to do now is talk about where we go. Um, does anyone want to react or make a proposal or a recommendation or modification of a proposed recommendation as a starting place?
Sarah, a question as a starting point.
A question is a starting point. Go ahead, Justin.
Um, can you tell us what the alternative weights were for the person that voted?
60-40.
Okay.
And let me see if I have the detail. And if you were the person who said this and want to jump in and feel comfortable doing that, go ahead and comment.
Yeah, Sarah, was Denise. And I put in the 60-40, and I would even say possibly 70-30. And I would support the 5-year look back.
Denise, in which direction? Which indicator, the cost indicator or the wage indicator? Which gets the heavier weight?
The wage.
The wage. Okay, thank you. Okay, Sierra and then Eve.
Thank you. The Hospital Association would support a 5-year or less look back period to capture recent inflation pressures on the healthcare industry. And then I did just want to point out just the way that this is labeled. So it's national healthcare expenditures, but this is per capita data, correct?
It is per capita data. Sorry, it's
Thank
not
you.
labeled in detail, but this is the percent change in per capita.
Thank you. We just want to express support for that as it also captures input and utilization trends as well. And we would support maintaining the 50-50 weight.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Go ahead, Eve.
Oh, thank you. I think based on some other groups that I'm in and feedback that I've heard from OHA, I suspect that this proposal of a 50-50 blend with national healthcare expenditures as 50%, it will be a non-starter going to OHA. I think that coming in over 5% for the cost growth target, we would risk that our recommendation would be ignored. So I am I'm concerned about that. I think, it would be interesting to see. I don't ask anyone to do math in public, but I don't know if anyone would be mathematically savvy enough to be able to figure out what a 60-40 split would look like, weighting median wage more, or what a 70-30 split would look like, so that we could just kind of take a look at those numbers from a pulse check perspective. But I would hate for the work of this group to be kind of dismissed because we come in with a recommendation that is so far different from what OHA was expecting. Um, so that's, and I would also recommend that this group recommend to OHA that when I read the statute, it does not say who needs to be subject to penalties. So I think that we should recommend that there be reductions in the number of individuals who are held accountable to penalties, or number of entities that are held accountable to penalties, maybe weighting incentives, for example, for primary care practices who just cannot afford to take a penalty, period. And that's what has all of us freaking out is that we can't afford to be penalized, and we want to work with the state and CCOs and other entities to bend the cost curve. So both things are true. And it feels like if we had a recommendation around shifting the penalties, that might help with kind of having a lower target that we would recommend.
Thanks, Eve. James?
Yeah, hi, James, Salem Health. I support the recommendation that Sierra laid out, and I will also note, I've attended every one of these RAC meetings. I'm not aware of materials out there that say what OHA will accept or how these other work groups might impact what our recommendation is. I think we are trying to make the best recommendation based on the discussion we had in this committee. So, um, uh, as far as it relates to penalties, as a reminder, the penalties are scaled to the size of organization that you are in terms of the amount of patients you have in their primary care panel. Nobody can afford these penalties as they are scaled up to potentially millions of dollars for very large organizations. I'm not sure I share that lens either, other than the penalties will drive unintended consequences. Thanks.
Eve, do you want to elaborate on anything in response to James?
Just that, and I agree. There hasn't been anything that has come out where OHA has said we absolutely won't consider something above this level. I think what I am hearing from OHA, my gestalt, is a sense that industry could be doing more. And so if a group that is primarily composed of industry, of which I'm a category. I run a primary care practice that is held accountable to these targets. I just fear that the recommendation won't be taken seriously, given some of the comments today also around like splitting out industry votes versus non-industry votes and trying to separate out it's just a sense and a gestalt that I have without verifiable evidence that I can assign to it.
Sierra, please.
No, just say that, OHA convened this work group and selected the membership. And so with that in mind, I just would hope that any recommendation from this group would be taken seriously. But I think that in order to productively move the conversation forward, it could be helpful to see hard numbers. And someone made a point that's hard to do that type of math on the fly. If it's helpful to take a pause, for anyone to run some calculations, if anyone on OHA staff is prepared to do that, maybe that could be helpful for continuing the conversation. ask to see Keaton volunteering.
Thanks, Keaton. That would be fantastic, so I don't have to do that live. While Keaton does that, I want to respond to just one point that Sierra made. Um, you said when OHA selected this work group, and I want to be clear that OHA did not limit participation in this work group other than one representative per organization. We said anyone who wants to be in this conversation on this work group can sign up, and we took all participants. So there was nobody was filtered out other than one representative per organization. Okay, while Keaton does math, does anyone else want to jump in?
Sarah, Tara Harrison with PHP. You mentioned one question about this, which was how long would the target be in place? This isn't our proposal, but when I read it, my interpretation was it would be a rolling target. So if we set it for a 3-year look back or a 5-year look back or a 10-year look back, that look back evolves each year. I don't know if that was the intent, but that's the way I understood it.
Okay, I'm gonna ask actually Daniel, I think proposal 3 initiated from you in the previous meeting. Do you want to say anything about intentions?
I envisioned a static target. I think one of the things that the last implementation committee got right was pinning a target for 5 years rather than having something rolling. We saw what hopefully is the sort of largest disruption in prices, utilization, et cetera, that we will hopefully see. And I think OHA responded to that appropriately, and that they didn't say, well, the target was set at this, it's got to stay this. That there was clear understanding of and grace for the circumstances that surrounded that. I think that's the risk and not having a floating measure that catches things. But even if it floats, right? There's unforeseen consequences in that. I'd rather have something stable that we can pin to. The contract negotiations are not, year to year. They can be 2, 3+ years in length, and so I like something steady. And while I'm here, I'll say I like a 5-year look back, or maybe a 3 at the least.
And it's not on the slide, but I said this in case folks missed it. I did do the math, and the 3-year look back would be 4.7% at a 50/50 weight. Yeah, Keaton, do you want to screen share? I think we can allow that, right, uh, Melissa, can we set that up?
Yeah, give me just 1 second.
Okay. Okay, let's switch and look at the weights and then come back to the static versus rolling and duration of look back.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm recovering from a little bit of a cold. Just to explain what I've done here, I've recreated the data from the slide, and then these. So this is the national healthcare expenditure and median wage data, the historic look back period. I have the 50/50 thing, so these numbers should match what is on the slide, except for this number, which was rounded. So I just added 1 decimal of precision. And then I have 60/40 and 70/30. The fractions are wage first and then NHCAE second. So this would be 60% median wage, 40% NHCE.
Thank you so much, Keaton. Um, I also feel like at this point, I really don't want to be talking much. Please don't wait for me to call on you. Please talk amongst yourselves. React to this. Deb, this is Oregon median wage.
I want to reflect on the the results a little bit with my very hoarse voice here. Uh, that it is clear to me that of those voting that there was a lot of support for incorporating some measure of the NHCE or some measure of industry cost drivers in there. It's not clear to me that if what we're really wanting to do is capture things that uh, industry participants have no control over, that the NHCE is going to be the best tool for that. I think that there is some stuff in there that definitely proxies for that. I think there's also some components of the NHCE that are other drivers, other components of expenditures that are, for lack of a better word, discretionary. I think there was the comment made earlier. I don't remember who said it about, what is something that OHA is actually going to do, and I think it does. I think there is a question to be asked here. Is OHA going to set a cost target of 5.5%, which is, those that have suggested supporting a 5-year look back and a 50-50 split, that's what you're looking at. I don't have any inside information on that by any means, and I'm not a member of other work groups. But if I were thinking about this from OHA's perspective, just me thinking about it and thinking about the legislative context of this, it would be hard for me to be able to say, oh, look, I'm bending the cost curve at a 5.5% rate. It's hard for me to see. I mean, this is why I ended up with the proposal that I ended up with, because the question that I was trying to answer was how can you report to the legislature and to Oregonians that you are successfully bending the cost curve? It's not. I don't know how you do it with 5.5%.
I mean, for me, I would say that if the cost growth were 30% year over year, and we said 5% is going to be next year, like everyone would agree that's bending the curve, right? And that's why I think it's critical to have a measure of cost growth, somehow part of this formula. I can't think of many other places in healthcare or otherwise where you would try to curb the growth of something but wouldn't have a reference point of what that growth has been. And I think that's the value of having healthcare expenditures. And that may be beside the point. We may all be, or most of us may be agreed on we have to incorporate that. But I think the wage index is an aspiration, right? And I can draw a line from that to healthcare cost growth, but one is not necessarily causal or should be directive of, I think. So that's why I like this sort of balanced approach. And I find, the point though that OHA may reject this out of hand, compelling, and I would prefer for that not to happen. And so if we can get to something reasonable with a reasonable formula, I'm in support of that.
I was just going to note that like the weighting doesn't really do much in this particular case, just because the median wage and the healthcare expenditures happen to be pretty close right now. I kind of like how Daniel framed the, wage as the aspiration side of things. The cost expenditures is more of the, the realistic. Sorry, those are my words, to be clear. Daniel did not specifically say those. But, I do like the shorter look back, just to have it be on more recent conditions. Like I certainly wouldn't go 10 to 20. But just noting that for our discussion now, whatever weighting we come up with, it really won't have that big of a change. unless we sort of drastically change the indexes that we're looking at. Thanks.
Hey, it's James Telemouth. Sounds a free for all right now, Sarah. We don't wait to be called on. Okay. First, thanks, Keaton, for running the math so quickly. I appreciate it. As the previous speaker just said, it doesn't look like altering it currently. The ratio changes it much from 5.5 to 5.4%. It might change it a lot in the future, depending on how these ratios move. And I don't think we know enough as a committee to know which one of these to weigh more heavily, which is why I think 50-50 right now is a reasonably balanced approach. That's my first comment. And the second comment, I think the elephant in the room, obviously I represent a healthcare provider. And I can tell you, I wish that our internal costs had only gone up by 5.8% a year over the last 5 years. They've gone up by a much higher rate. And as a healthcare consumer, also, my family, we would like healthcare costs to go at a lower rate, but we have to be careful about unintended consequences. The reason those underlying costs have gone up so high is because there is a shortage of healthcare workers in Oregon. We can't put ourselves in a position where Oregon is less attractive for healthcare workers to come and work in. There are also much higher cost drugs that our patients need that are going at much higher rates, which nobody on this call has any control over, that are going up at a higher rate. Setting a target lower reduces our ability to access those types of drugs. And of course, all of this is falling on the back of penalties that are going to be assessed against primary care providers, primarily, as well as insurers. And so unintended consequences of not setting a target that reflects that reality is something that I'm very keen to avoid as a provider, but more importantly, as a consumer. Thanks.
I think part of what I'm struggling with here is just the broader context of this, that like there are a lot of exclusions to the cost growth target before PIPs or penalties come into play, like automatic exceptions, and then there's a whole reasonableness thing that where one could put in a great argument about, you know, pharmacy costs or other things. And I feel like I'm hearing a lot about how hard it is to meet this, which sensitive too, but at the same time, like the data right now is showing only two entities on track to actually be penalized. Um, one of them being United Healthcare, that I don't have a ton of sympathy for, with their literal, I think it's billions in profits. And so I struggle with being I struggle with rectifying those two things of what I'm hearing and what I see in terms of people actually like on track to be penalized, and the tremendous exclusions of increases for frontline healthcare worker wages, etc. Um, and so I think that's part of why I'm having trouble coming on board with this proposal. That said, I'm happy to like sit back, and for people who are supportive of this proposal, I think like our committee needs to get to a place where there's something on paper, even if that's like a, you know, three people think this and 13 or 17, whatever the number is, support something else. Um, so.
I do want to jump in and thank you again, acknowledging I really don't want to be talking too much and please continue with the free for all, but I do want to name the other elephant in the room. And folks who are tracking this know there was a hearing at Legislative Days yesterday at the House Health Committee where we talked about the cost growth target program. And there is a proposal, and Representative Nose is signaling that he plans to introduce a bill on behalf of a coalition of payers and providers that would put a 10-year moratorium on financial penalties for the cost growth target program. So I know a number of you have made comments about concerns about the target value in light of penalties. This is a totally hypothetical question. I have no idea what's going to happen legislatively in February. How much does your recommendation change, if at all, if the penalties for this program go away in the same time period that we're talking about setting the target for?
I'm not sure that that is really relevant to the work group's recommendation, actually, because I think we had some discussion at the start of what is in scope and out of scope for this work group, and we move forward with the understanding that the program is going to proceed as is, which is with performance improvement plans and penalties. And so I think that we do have to make a recommendation based on how this program is structured and how we should expect it to move forward, given that we cannot rely on legislation, and also legislation, potential legislation is out of scope for this work group.
This is Denise. I agree. And I also wouldn't change my mind on these at all. I think these are also reflective of future cost or costs that we're experiencing now. And one other factor that I think that I consider is that employers are adding benefits like GLP coverage, infertility, things of that nature that will drive costs up, but they're doing that in order to attract and retain their employees. So there are other variables that will drive healthcare costs that are outside of the industry's ability to contain them. So I'm supportive of the direction. The weighting is okay, but I don't think it would change if the penalties were released. But I do think it needs to be higher than what we currently have.
I think I would just echo Kirsten in two ways. One, in that um, I'm happy, like, I think I'm probably not going to get there on including the cost of healthcare and trying to um, lower the cost of healthcare. Um, so happy to just sit back, but also it does seem like there is somewhat of a incongruent nature in this conversation from the the way that the cost growth target actually works, given, as Kirsten was saying, there are only very few organizations are actually at any even close to being subject to any sort of accountability, given the many reasonable reasons why someone can exceed the target. And so it seems like if we're going to account for all of those things within the cost growth target, we're kind of undermining the whole point of the cost growth target in the first place. So we either need to take it as it is, which is understanding that there are lots of exceptions and that those are taken into account before any accountability happens, or we don't. And I mean, given that, this is just the target, given all other things being the same, it seems to me that we should be taking those things into account. Like, for example, new drugs, which are very explicitly called out as not as something that is a reasonable basis for exceeding the cost growth target.
I was wondering if it would be possible for Keaton to get the NHCE and median wage for a 3-year look back period so that he could add that to this table.
Someone gives me the numbers, I'm happy to put them in there. You can watch me do it.
I can pull them. Give me a second, Keaton. I'll put them in the chat for you while everyone keeps talking.
So I guess I'll just, since we're just opining, I don't envy the job that OHA had here. I don't envy the job that anyone has here, which is why I was so focused on guiding principles for this. I don't think it serves anyone, including OHA, to have a number that's viewed as arbitrarily chosen, which is why I think a formula is so important. I've heard feedback on kind of the reasonableness process as sort of like a extra element of this program that kind of benefits the industry. And I agree with that, but I also agree with Daniel's comment here that that's a very burdensome process. That's actually a process that adds costs to the system. And I think that's why it's so important to have the actual formula for the target include something that makes it a little bit more realistically achievable. I didn't the guiding principles that we put forth that kind of led to a lot of what we're talking about now were done independent of our current state. This is something that if we want it to be successful and we want it to be an element of what we're doing in Oregon to control our costs, it should be based on a formula. It should be something that, is done kind of independent of the facts of the day and can be sort of like dealt with over time and adapt over time to meet the needs of the day. So it's a very complex problem, but I do think we're a lot closer now to where we were when we started.
Sarah, I feel like if I could, we all sides being heard, call the question time, but I won't say that. But I do think that, there's a lot of good points that have been made here, and I think we are kind of wrapped around it right now as far as whether we're going to move forward. So maybe, I mean, I suspect that you're not just going to give OHA a number, you're going to give it with all this discussion and everything, all the points that were kind of made and kind of the parts where we were kind of pushing back and forth on it in the report to OHA. But maybe you could tell us if that's accurate or exactly how it's going to be handed over, because I think we have the vote but as you mentioned, this is an all-comer committee. So I think all those opinions need to be expressed in the vote. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, thanks for that, Brian. I mean, I think I want to be really honest. Like, I do not have time or bandwidth to be able to write a report, circulate it with you all, and have you agree that that is the committee's deliberation. I think I am prepared to do some like screen sharing and live edit like a recommendation statement. And that's the official recommendation. I think obviously all of the meeting has been recorded, all of the points that everyone has shared. We have that and we'll wrap that up and take that to leadership. I don't want to promise that we're going to write a report that represents this. I think it's going to be a statement, and I apologize for that because that's maybe less
To
than ideal in reflecting the
Totally
full
fair.
perspectives, but we want to
Totally fair.
we want to move this in December.
Yeah, totally fair.
In terms of calling the question, now that folks have the 3 year, I I mean, we could sort of switch Robert's rules style. Do people want to make a proposal and see? We could do a roll call vote and see where people are on something specific. Um, I'm fine with that. Whatever you think is going to have best help solidify this. But Craig, I saw you come off mute too, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I don't know how much you would want to leave up to the OHA in terms of picking percentages, or do we want to be real firm about that that piece of the recommendation?
And let me state my working assumption, which I probably should have said. I was assuming that we would leave today with, if there's a recommendation with a majority vote behind it, the recommendation would be the work group recommends a cost growth target of X% based on dot, dot, dot. Either the disagreement about that or the minority recommendation or minority perspective is Y. And that would be it, like one paragraph that we're landing on. If that's not the right level or completely reflective enough, like please tell me. But I was assuming that you would have a specific percentage, a formula, if it is formulaic.
Yeah, it just seems like introducing the 60/40 or 70/30 gets us back to doing another ranked order vote or something like that. So not sure how to clarify that.
Hey, this is Jay from Salem Health. I guess, yeah, I guess based on the comment, really, Sarah, you're looking for a number or a methodology. There's not going to be a report. People can access the recordings if they want it. I think it's probably time then just to vote on it if that's what we're looking for. Are you looking for someone to make a recommendation? I'm happy to do that.
That was the
And
sense I was getting from Brian that maybe we're at that point.
yeah, I mean, I would recommend, and please, I'm sure people won't be shy to change this to something better, but I would recommend the proposal 3 as proposed by Daniel with a 5-year look back, clarification being it's a rolling 5 years. That would be the methodology going forwards for the 50-50 split.
I started to second that, and then I'm questioning the rolling 5.
Yeah, I think you need the rolling as well.
Thank you. So I would second.
Since I happen to be sharing screen, I decided to put that proposal in a cell as I heard it, and then bold the number that it would be in the immediate term. James, please correct me if I got any of those details wrong. And also, if you guys want to like take the screen away from me, that's fine too.
Can I I have a clarifying question for James's proposal. This work group was charged with 26 to 2030. The available data for the 3-year or the 5-year historic look back starts looking back with 2023. So 3 years is 21, 22, 23. That would be the target for 2026. And then with rolling, that means we'd update shift 1 year, and that would be the target for 2027. Is that the correct summary of the proposal?
Yeah, I'm. It sounds like Sarah, you're familiar with what the latest data is, but yeah, as annual data comes out, presumably it comes out annually, then we would roll it. So we'd be able to have a methodology for the all years proposed. Year one would be a number, and then as soon as we can, when annual data comes out, we update it, and that would be year two and year three and year four. Trying to keep it, if trying to keep it simple.
All right, Daniel, I know you had some thoughts about not rolling. It sounds like there's maybe some agreement that 50-50 5-year look back, everyone is many, not everyone, is okay to live with that. Is there more discussion about either the 3 versus 5 years or the rolling versus static?
I still prefer static, but all else same.
I'm not weighing in on the rolling or not rolling, but I do wonder with a rolling whether the national health care expenditure data and the median wage data are released at similar times and what that would mean for the timing each year when the next year's cost growth target would be announced.
Sorry, I have a very unprofessional thing to say about I don't know that we can make assumptions about when federal data will be available on any sort of schedule right now. I can look about when the median wage data is updated. Um, it tends to be included in the quarterly forecast, but I'd have to go check with the state economist about when that changes over from projected to actual.
Yeah, this is James again. I mean, I certainly can. I mean, that sounds complex. I'm happy to support a static, maybe with an asterisk, Sarah, that OHA are monitoring it, and if we have another pandemic, maybe we might want to revisit it, or things of that nature.
This is Denise. The only reason I support the rolling is that there's a lot of changes that occur in the system that take time to implement, and to me it stabilizes the and doesn't allow for the erratic behavior from each year to year.
I don't think I have any more massaging in terms of the proposal that's on the table. Just before a vote, wanted an opportunity to voice that I will be a no vote just because I don't think it's realistic to think that 50% of the cost growth target would be related to healthcare expenditures historically. So, I'm happy to. I'm not suggesting that the group make changes, just wanted that on the record.
No, Keaton, absolutely not. Um, okay. James or anyone else, do you want to re-up or restate the proposal?
See, this is why I don't work in government, Sarah, because I'm not good at working with large
This is
groups
what we get for not appointing a chair for this group.
I
I
mean,
do.
just for the sake of us ending this before we end up in the next 5 year rolling cycle, I would happily amend it to a static target, but subject to adjustment by OHA in extraordinary circumstances such as a pandemic. I think that's pretty reasonable compromise. Again, I don't work in government, so it might not be.
Thank
I
you.
mean, I think static, because your last clause there is, yes, that's the reasonableness process. Like that, and I guess that's slightly different. It wouldn't change the target itself, but that's already a piece of what OHA would consider. So for me, I guess I'm relatively indifferent, but static does feel simpler. And then the reasonableness process can handle, something very strange happens in the middle of this next review period.
I actually would like to speak for the 70-30 option with a 3-year look back. I think going back 5 years is just too far. I think 70-30 because the whole reason for having this is concern about what that wages aren't keeping up with expenses, correct? So I think um, I would propose the 70-30 with a 3-year look back. I'm not as fussed with the rolling as I am or static. I think I could be fine either way with that, but I do like giving a higher weight to the wage piece.
Okay, there are now two proposals on the table. I'm trying to think of the most effective way to do this. Virtual facilitation is hard, y'all. So, would people be comfortable putting your yes, no vote in the chat, including if you're voting yes, no on which order? I think we should do one proposal at a time. How about that? Let's do a yes, no vote on the 50-50 split, 5-year look back static as proposed by James most recently. Are we okay doing that? All work group members, name in the chat yes, no on that proposal.
Sarah, could we vote separately, like on the static versus rolling, and then come back to the larger question at hand?
Can we see where we are on the proposal with the static before we have a second proposal? I'm tallying. All right. Stopping there, I just had 19 yes and 6 no, if I caught everybody correctly. And that's on the static. So, Jen, to your question, do you want to make a proposal and have a vote with rolling?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to complicate this, but yes, the same proposal, just with rolling. But I don't know that would be
Okay,
great.
let's do that and call that vote. Okay, so 50-50 split, 5-year look back, rolling. Same thing in the chat, yes, no. Okay. I have 9 no's and 8 yeses, 10 no's and 8 yeses. So current proposal. Okay. This is helpful. We're moving. I'm sorry. Denise, did you want to come back to the 70-30 and make a proposal and we will vote on that proposal?
It was Deb, and yes.
Wait, somebody just changed their vote. I think we're at 9-9. Denise, that's a no that you do not want to make a 70-30 proposal.
I think Deb said it was.
It's me. It's
Oh, Deb,
Deb.
I'm sorry. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry,
it's
Deb.
Deb, and I would propose 70-30 with a 3-year look back. And I guess for clarity, we should do static versus rolling again, but anyway.
Okay, Keaton, you were doing amazing. Thank you.
Can I suggest that right now it does seem like static has more support than rolling. So let's keep this initial thing static, and then we can revisit that question if we want to. But just looking at the difference in vote counts here, it seems like there's a clear preference for a static thing versus a rolling thing. I do Robert's rules for my academic department, which is this whole process has been really calm relative to academic department meetings. So
I can't tell if that's high praise or a low bar. But good job, everybody. Okay,
both.
Deb's proposal, 70-30 split, 3-year look back, static. Yes, no vote in the chat, please.
Sarah, can you clarify what is 70 and what is 30?
70 is wage, 30 is national healthcare expenditures, and that is the 4.54%. Yes. Okay. Anybody else on this one?
Maybe type in the proposal and then we can put yes, no in the chat. It's just hard to differentiate.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think on the screen is where the proposal is.
Sarah, could we propose a 70-30 split with a 5-year look back? Get a
Yes,
vote
hold
on
on.
that?
Hold on. I want to total up what we have on this before we move to a new proposal. And I think the idea that we will put a break in the chat with the new proposal is a good one. Okay. I had 4 yeses and 1, 2, 3, 17 no's. 16 no's.
Sorry, I missed that. 4 yeses, 17 no's.
16 no's.
16 no.
Okay. Sorry. And then we had a 4th proposal. What was the 4th proposal?
A 5-year, 70-30 split, 5-year back, static.
Okay. I have a new break in the chat with the new proposal. Yes, no vote. Okay. I see 2 yeses and everyone else no. That's 22 no's, I think. Okay. I would propose, based on this very rapid, calm exercise, that the 70-30 split, regardless of look back, has been voted down. Is that an accurate statement? Can you keep the vote count for reference there and just like gray it out?
Yeah,
Thanks.
sure.
So I
That's
don't have to
exactly what
redo
I was going to
that.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think the proposal on the 50-50 split rolling zeroed out. We will share a copy of the Excel file. Absolutely. So I think the only proposal that has had a majority yes vote is the starting proposal, 50-50 split, 5-year look back, static, subject to adjustment by OHA in ordinary circumstances. That's what's standing.
Hey, Sarah, Tara with PHP. I'm looking at the actual, if we're looking at a static number, right? And so what would the cost growth target be? If I'm seeing this, it's not a very big spread, right? 70-30 at 5 years is 5.38. 50-50 is 5.5. I haven't looked at all the votes, but my guess is it's kind of split the way it was coming into today. If we can get to a compromise place where the entire work group can support a proposal, I think there's incredible value in that. So I'd love to hear from folks that voted for the 70-30 on maybe where we can get to a place where we can find a compromise between 5.5 and 5.38, because I think we're incredibly close.
Sarah, maybe ask, can the people that voted for 5-5 land on 5-3-8 or vice versa?
So I'm not Tara, I'm not sure I followed you. And I think most people preferred the 50-50 methodology over the 70-30 split. Are you asking for the people who don't like 70-30 to talk about why and see if they can get there? Or are you asking the people who liked 50-50 better to see if they can get to 70-30?
The latter.
Neither of the above.
Oh, okay, great. Then can you help me understand what you're asking?
Yeah, absolutely. So my thinking, and I haven't looked at how everyone voted, right? The numbers and the scrolling went so fast, but my thought coming in was this proposal, the 50-50 split coming in, there were 3 or 4 entities that didn't vote for it, and the ranked choice voting is one of their preferences. But now, as we're looking at the difference between a 50-50 and a 70-30, it seems as though those votes are kind of coming along to an idea of a 70-30 split. And if that's the case, and that's a big if, and that's where I was asking, maybe we can hear from folks.
Yeah, let me
If
let me
that's the
restate that
case,
then.
then
Yep.
we're really close together. Like 5.5 and 5.38
I think
isn't a
what
significant difference.
Yeah, Tara, I think what you're seeing here is the people who did not support, and this is on the ranked choice voting results in the slides. These are the people who do not, the no votes there, who did not select Proposal 3 as their short list, don't support the inclusion of national healthcare expenditures per capita in the target methodology at all, regardless of the split. And those of you who voted no on the 50-50 split, if you want to say anything more about your perspective here, I think that's what Tara's getting at, because I don't think it matters to you, if I heard correctly, if it's 50-50 or 70-30, you are opposed to the inclusion of national healthcare expenditures, full stop.
No, I voted no on the 50-50 because I wanted the wage piece to be higher, but I'm fine with going with 50-50. So you could change one of the 6 to a yes if you want to.
I'd like to express sincere appreciation for Tara's like, oh, I think there's a place where we could get to consensus here. I want to acknowledge that that's coming from a really amazing place, and appreciate that. Uh, I am of the camp that Sarah described, where like I voted against all these because they do include a healthcare indicator. So I think I would support for efficiency. It looks like there are a lot of people who are supporting the 50-50. I'm happy to sit here and listen and participate in these votes, if people want to narrow that down, but there does seem to be a majority opinion here. So maybe we move on with our majority recommendation and a minority recommendation.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp.
Okay. Does anyone want to say anything else about the majority recommendation, which, as I understand, emerged from that rapid voting, is the original proposal up at the top? 50-50 split, 5-year look back, static, with caveat adjustment under extraordinary circumstances. Is that the majority vote recommendation? Are there any other people who cannot live with this or would like to propose anything else for the majority opinion, majority vote before we move to the minority report? And being really explicit, as currently calculated, that is a cost growth target of 5.5%.
Seems like Sarah, this is James at Salem Health. Seems like Sarah, we should, I don't know, I think some people maybe were hanging out on the 70-30 and the 3-year look back. I think we should have one final vote on that current winner to get the final tally, and then we can move on to whatever other work we need to complete.
Okay, I think that's a great idea to do a second vote on the final proposal. Tara, is that a new hand or an old hand?
Sorry, it's old.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to put a prompt in the chat and we'll do one more vote count. Okay, final yes, no vote for All right. I got 19 yes and 4 no. Is that everybody? I will double check the vote count in the transcript in writing this up. Okay. Everyone, everyone who voted yes, we're good. We're ready to move on. Okay, Keaton, thank you so much for screen sharing. Wait, we're going to update that to 20. I see Sabrina's last vote there. 20 yes, 4 no. If you can stop screen sharing and send me that spreadsheet, I will make sure everybody gets it. Thank you so much. Melissa, you can pull the slides down entirely. All right. Couple minutes left. Those of you who voted no, the 4 of you who voted no for the majority proposal, would you like to make an alternate proposal to be the minority perspective here?
I'll propose that the minority perspective is that the cost growth target should not be based on any indicators of healthcare industry costs, but instead draw from equally balanced indicators of Oregon's median wages and general inflation minus 1 percentage point in order to bend the cost curve.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah, I'm happy to support that as one of the people who voted no on the other one.
I guess I'm the fourth person who voted no. I have concerns about the minus 1%. I'll be honest about that because I feel like it's already bending the cost curve to be going at a lower indicator of inflation than healthcare inflation. My preference would be the blend that you identified without the minus 1%.
I think the minus 1% is a pretty critical component, given that I think from our view, and I think probably the view of most people in Oregon, healthcare already costs more than it should. And so simply maintaining a status quo that doesn't work isn't the right approach. And we need to meaningfully bend the cost curve as it relates to people's experience. So I think that I don't I think I would like that component of it is a pretty important one for me.
So there may be a couple of minority perspectives, Sarah, because I don't think that I'll get there just as someone who is trying to make ends meet and very close to going out of business. As a healthcare provider, I take care of 10% of the people in my community. And, if I'm held accountable to a target that ultimately puts me out of business, that's 10% of our population who don't have healthcare. And then it's very cheap. I think I mentioned that in a prior meeting. It's very cheap. So, I think that there may just be multiple perspectives.
Okay. Eve, is it fair to say that your perspective, you agree with Kirsten's statement other than the minus 1%, the 1 percentage point?
Yeah, from a perspective of where I think we might be able to reasonably get to with OHA, I think that would be my thought.
Eve, just an honest question here. I would really be interested to hear your perspective. I mean, I guess for me, I totally hear that and like do not want this to lead to anyone who's providing care to go out of business. Um, and I think all of the exemptions in the reasonableness process to me, and then also the fact that financial penalties statutorily have to take into account whether, um, or maybe it's just in rule, but it says that they must take into account whether the financial penalties would cause um, insolvency of a entity. Um, and so like it seems like there's so many things in place before financial penalties happen that like that potential outcome, even with a target that is, the proposed one from Kirsten is isn't going to happen. So I'm curious kind of what your perspective is on that.
I think you have more trust and faith than I do. And part of that is just that we as providers get hit all the time with stuff that we were told would never happen. And then it's coming down the pike and it's happening to us. So there's not a whole lot of trust that that process will be followed with integrity, to protect those of us who are really desperately trying, and serving our community in really important ways. I think a lot more work would need to be done in terms of building trust between providers and regulators in order for me to get from here to there.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
All right. We have 5 minutes left. I want to summarize a couple of things and make sure everyone is comfortable with what happens now. I know I said I couldn't do a report, and I maintain that I cannot, but I would like to write up that paragraph or that one-page summary and send it out to you all, post it on the website to reflect where we landed today, as well as sharing the spreadsheet that Keaton was taking notes in. So I will push that out as a follow-up so everyone has that as the record. If I have any errors in that, especially for the two minority statements, please let me know and I will correct that. I will try to get that out to you all tomorrow. Um, Charlie, can we still do a vote among the original no votes? Yes. Would you like to do a full vote, the whole
I mean,
committee? Or
well, I don't really know how the voting works for a minority vote. I was thinking that the people who voted no were the ones who were voting on the minority vote, so it'd be the four no
I feel
votes
like
of
I
the.
heard affirmative statements from three of you and then Eve's additional statement, so I felt like we were covered, but I would be happy to
Okay, cool.
on the
If
record.
if if the record is that three of the four no votes recommend Minority Report 1, and then the fourth recommends Minority Report 2, then that as long as that's reflected, that's I don't need to
Yeah.
have a formal Robert's Rules of Order or anything like that.
I need a gavel today. Okay, I will make sure that that is called out in the one paragraph half page write up that I will do. Um, I want to remind everyone that you are welcome to continue to submit public comment about this, about the recommendation, whether or not you agreed with it, whether or not you think OHA should consider other variations or alternatives. November 30th is the deadline for that. OHA will be taking this up through leadership in December. So welcome additional commentary between now and then. Um, is there anything else that anyone would like to add to the record before I wrap us up?
Just if
Oh,
you, sorry,
go
you
ahead, go
said
ahead,
the
go ahead.
OHA leadership will take this up in December. Does that mean a December announcement or January?
The goal is by the end of December. There's a lot going on right now, so I really hope for December. I can commit that we will let people know if it looks like it's going to push into January.
Thanks.
Keaton and then James.
Yeah. So I want to thank everyone. I want to say, from my perspective, as an semi outside academic looking in, that it's been really valuable to me to hear the perspectives here. One thing that I want to say, and that I hope maybe in some form gets shared to OHA leadership, is that it is very clear that this is a very blunt force kind of policy that's sort of imposed on things by the legislature. It's not, I've come to the realization that certainly this isn't the way that I would set it up if I were writing the laws, and as a consequence, I think that makes this process challenging, and so I really appreciate the multiple perspectives from people on this.
I want to thank you, Sarah, for herding cats.
Anytime. James, didn't want to cut you off either.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say, this is obviously very difficult, and regardless of outcome, I just appreciate, Sarah, you and your team. I think organizing the materials well in advance so we can read them, so we're well prepared coming in, and also you've certainly role modeled allowing everybody, if they have an opinion or something to say, to participate in a meeting, which I appreciate. I like keeping that also helped me reflect and learn things too. So thank you for running an effective RAC.
Thank you. I really want to end by thanking everybody. This was a lot of your time in a very short period of time for a controversial topic and a controversial program. I can acknowledge that. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for doing the reading. Thank you for being brave and making proposals. Um, I don't necessarily agree with everything everyone said in this conversation, but that's okay. I didn't have to. That wasn't my job. And so I just really thank you for all the perspectives that you brought and how thoughtful and open to the conversation you were. Last thing I want to say, in addition to thank you, is I know there were conversations throughout where I held the boundary and said that's out of scope. And there were repeated questions about where some of those conversations should go. And I want to reiterate my call for if there are some things that you want us to be looking at programmatically and revisiting, I do still encourage you to put that forward and we'll talk about whether or not that goes to our tag, whether or not that goes somewhere else. We'll see what happens during the legislative session, whether or not we need to do another ad hoc work group like this on additional pieces of methodology. I am open to that and I wanted to make sure you heard that from me. So it's 5 o'clock. Thank you all so much for your time and engagement in this process. Talk to you all soon.